Afternoon, my name is Tabitha Binding and I'm Head of Education and Engagement for Timber Development UK. This is the second series from Timber Development UK, where we are creating the opportunity to learn directly from the multidisciplinary teams behind the incredible projects selected from the Wood Awards 2022. So what is Timber Development UK? It's been formed from the merger of two of the largest and longest established organisations in the timber supply chain, the Timber Trade Federation and the Timber and Research and Development Association. I should get that right. I did used to work for TRADA. Now let's move forward. What we are seeking to do, we're seeking to connect the supply chain, to lead best practice and accelerate to a low carbon future. And the highlight, I think, of actually showing that, that carbon future and the opportunities to use timber are highlighted in the Wood Awards. So the Wood Awards 2023 are now open for entries until June. So just go to www.woodawards.com and upload your entries. And we look forward to seeing you later this year. So today we're here to learn from the creators of the Greyfriars Charteris Centre. And we're going to hear from Kieran from Konishi Gaffney Architects, from Andrew and Mike from Forshaw Gauld, and from Neville and Scott from Old School Fabrications. And the project was shortlisted in the 2022 awards. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the box and we'll come back to the team and ask them the questions at the end. So without further ado, I'd like Kieran to start presenting your slides, please.
So, sorry, 1 second. I need to share screen. Okay, so perfect. Yes. Hello, so my name is Kieran Gaffney. I'm Director of Konishi Gaffney Architects. We're based in Edinburgh, and I'm really pleased to be here and talking about this project for the Greyfriars Charteris Centre. So I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to Neville and Scott at Old School Fabrications to talk about the selection of timber and this main feature stair that they did with us. And then I'll speak for another 10 minutes, and then we'll hand back to the engineers, Andrew and Mike. So this is the site. It's in Edinburgh. It's an old church, but it's not just the church. The church building's on the left here. On the right, there's an office building which is part of the same centre. And this is our buildings in the middle, our little, what we call is the link building. But it's a great site, overlooks Arthur's Seat and the crags in the background, and it's very, very central. The project started as a competition. The client invited 5 architects to sort of pitch an idea for how to organise the centre. The brief was, so it was a former church which had this ancillary building as this kind of office building. The church was diminishing in congregation numbers, and they merged this with the Greyfriars Church itself, which is a very old and very well-known church in the centre of Edinburgh. And so the building became surplus to requirements. So the question was, what do you do with a building like this? And the client's brief was to make a building for the community, so a centre for community. And in a way, the word community centre doesn't really sum it up. But there were some technical problems with the building. There was 6 doors. So when you arrive at this building, where do you go? The door number 1 was the main entrance when it wasn't used as a church, and door number 2 was the main entrance when it was on mass days, on church days. As you come into the building, it's quite unwelcoming, very tight space. There were 6 steps up to the front door, and which is a kind of tradition in churches, this idea of coming up to God. But that's a problem if you want to have access for all. So disabled access and wheelchair access was one of the key components for this, but also to make a space that was welcoming and open. between the office building and the church, there was a ramp. This is the sort of ramp, quite an ad hoc arrangement, and it was all a bit kind of basic, really. The church itself was really nice. This was the main nave, the main church. It had a very dark stained roof, which we'll talk about later, but it also had all of the windows in the church were this kind of what the client called toilet glass, the glass that you can't see out of. And it was leaded and traditional, but this is from 1912. It isn't from 1812 or 1712. It's a relatively modern building, but you couldn't see in and you couldn't see out. You couldn't see the weather. The thing that was interesting to us about the church was the basement, the crypt, the basement hall was this space. And you can see on the right-hand side windows, which brought in light. That was, so normally the crypt is very dark and it's kind of not much use except for storage. But in this church, because of there was a big slope down, a big side street with a slope. And it meant the crypt was a really important space. And the thing that won us the competition was to make that connection between the ground floor hall and the basement hall. And we proposed a stair which allowed us to cut. The stair did two things. It physically connected the space, but also visually connected. So when you arrive in the building into this foyer space, you can see both up into the hall and down into the lower hall. The lower hall was used as a kind of office building. It was a social enterprise hub where they have startups and new businesses sharing space and sharing facilities to do social enterprise work. And there's a wide variety of things that they do. The other key thing is this lift, which caused a lot of issues, but we were able to manage the lift to go from the basement up all the way up to the second floor, so 4 stories. But that was quite tricky, and we'll talk again about that. So this was our SketchUp model. This is a section through the church. You can see the big church hall here and the crypt, the lower hall below. And our plan was to make out this connection, the physical connection between the two halls. So I'm going to hand over to Old School Fabrications because we have quite a collaborative way of working, and we've worked with Old School before. So quite early on in the project, after winning the competition, we approached them and said, how should we make this stair? How should it work? So if I can, oh yeah, so this is the space that we made downstairs. So this is this office and sort of multi-function space. But if I'll stop sharing and hand over to Scott and Neville.
Okay, is that okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Neville and this is Scott, and we're company directors at Old School Fabrications. So I'll start the talk initially. We'll talk about 7 different things. A little bit of an introduction about Old School, our kind of collaborative relationship with Konishi Gaffney, a bit about the design process, then moving on to the build, the installation, and some nice completion shots. And we'll hopefully have a second or two to kind of talk about our kind of reflections on the project. So yes, we are a creative design and fabrication company based in Edinburgh. We specialise in making high-end bespoke objects for architects, artists, museums, and galleries. Anything small, big, weird and wonderful, we're the people to come to. So what's possibly quite interesting about Old School is that both Scott and I originally went to art school. We've got degrees in fine art, and in fact pretty much our whole team come from a non-traditional kind of background, if we went with degrees in design and fine art. So Scott and I met about 12 years ago, installing exhibitions in and around Edinburgh as young graduates, and we kind of struck off a good relationship from there. We realised there was a bit of a gap in the market for really nicely, carefully considered objects, things that are nicely detailed and developed. And yeah, the business has grown over the last 12 years in quite an organic way, but we've developed into a kind of large team of designers and makers. We work throughout the UK using a wide range of different products, from your traditional kind of sheet materials to hardwoods, solid surface, acrylics, plastics, metal, concrete, fiberglass. Kieran kindly invited us into his practice back in 2019, at a very early stage of the project. And we'd worked with Kieran before, and it was, yeah, we think this project was successful because our design and knowledge of materials and processes, we were introduced really early into the project, and that our knowledge kind of, we feel like our knowledge kind of informed the aesthetics of the job. We certainly felt that Kieran had a mutual respect and appreciation and a kind of trust of our kind of skills and our understanding and language of materials, and trusted us to. So that we felt like we're on an even pegging, which was really nice. This isn't the staircase. Each year we make Christmas cards and gifts for all of our clients, and we use the offcuts of projects we've done previously. And this was one Christmas card that Kieran had in his window, and the little triangles are snowy peaks with a little white sprayed top, and they're made from maple. So we're big fans of maple. We really enjoy how kind of hard wearing it is, how well it behaves. It's got a really nice kind of pinkish kind of grain as well. Also sits really nicely with birch plywood as well. It's actually quite hard to distinguish the difference between it, but it's much more hard wearing than birch. And we've also got a good tried and tested supplier. So when it felt like quite an obvious material to use. So from that stage, we went on to making just nice little scale prototypes. So this is a detail of a tread and a riser with the kind of birch plywood balustrade. Obviously, it's quite an open staircase, and there's a double step and a single step. So we were really cautious that we were really concerned about the kind of nosing and the differentiation between so people didn't fall down the stairs. So we really like, again, working with walnut as well, and that kind of contrast, that kind of nice the warmth that brings. And here's a kind of side-on detail of it. Scott will move on to this, but we introduced nice little shadow gaps and details there. What was quite interesting was that Kieran had asked us to make this prototype, and we'd made it in quite an aesthetic way, I guess. We hadn't really thought too much about the movement of it, and got an email one day from Kieran saying, this has been sitting in my office for the last few months, warm office, and you'll notice at the tip of the tread here at the bullnose, it shrunk by, I mean, that must have been at least 5, 6, 7 millimeters, and that really, I'm really glad it did shrink, because it really informed how we went to then design and build the actual staircase. So I'll pass you on to Scott, who will talk more about the design process.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Scott Laverie, co-director at Old School Fabrications. So yeah, just carrying on from where Neville was with the sampling, like Neville was alluding to, that sample was really made for aesthetically sort of trying to figure out materials, but obviously in seeing how the movement reacted, we probably would have done this anyway, but we started to think a little bit more clearly about how we would manufacture the stair to make sure that when movement happens, which it will happen, it doesn't create a kind of obvious bad result with the two parts sort of not aligning. So the first sort of step in that process, I suppose, is to think a little bit clearer about the design. So almost on every project we produce our own construction drawings, and it's really for two reasons. One, for us to better understand the project, and secondly, to actually have drawings, workshop drawings that we can hand to our team them to fabricate. So so it's almost like there's too many drawings in this job. There's that engineer's drawings, there's architect's drawings, there's our drawings, there's steelwork drawings, but it all kind of comes to an important essential kind of reason that everyone needs certain bits of information. So I suppose kind of going back to the actual fabrication. So we receive materials from a supplier, James Latham, in this instance for our maple, and it comes in rough sawn boards. Kieran was quite keen that the boards remained quite wide, so it didn't feel like the small planks, really wide panels, and that has its own problems, as you can imagine, with timber in a wide board. It's susceptible to cupping, and so we tried our best to balance the boards as we machine them. So, for example, kind of letting the boards sit between planing processes, but eventually ended up with very flat, evenly planed boards that we can machine down. So we tried to do as much as we could in our workshop to manufacture as many things as possible before going on site to assemble the staircase. So there's just a detail of the walnut nosing being glued onto the treads. So like the sample alluded to, we took special care to make sure that as movement happened throughout the wood, it was fixed at the point at the tread sort of nosing, and any movement happened shrunk back the way from the riser, and that created a kind of, and when that happened, it would create like a nice shadow gap detail. So yeah, there was quite a significant amount of engineering involved in these treads, and particularly because we were really keen there wasn't any visible fixings in the stair at all, which was possible in this circumstance. I mean, these are like 4 meter wide, 4 meter long maple panels, so they're hard things to make sure stay secure to the timber kind of build of the stair below. But we were able to access from the underside and secure the treads and risers from below. It's quite critical that we used like lozenge-shaped holes in our substructure to make sure the timber was able to sort of flow while still remaining attached to the structure below. Just details of elements of the timber where dovetailed components that were able to move within the structure, but remaining structurally sound. Technical drawings. And then, so once everything was well produced in the workshop, then obviously the next stage is going to site. It was a complicated place to work because there was obviously many trades involved in the building at this point, and the stair was like a kind of tempting thoroughfare for every trade to go down, and we'd obviously spent a lot of time making all these treads and risers and so on, and lacquering them all, so protecting them as we sort of worked was tough. You can see here, this is the sort of plywood balustrade getting applied, and it's maybe worth noting that we made a decision wherever there was an edge to the birch plywood that we would face that with a lip of maple, so a hard wearing edge, and that was a nice aesthetic, but also practical detail. Unfortunately, I'm the smallest person in the team, so I got the enviable task of securing the the lower steps to the framework below. So just obviously nearing completion. We also, as part of our contract, we installed a kind of sliding door partition system. So you'll see in the left-hand side of the staircase, there's an aperture kind of through the balustrade, and that allowed a sliding screen to kind of dissect the stair. So again, this is a kind of non-standard partition bifold screen door that we kind of work with Kieran to kind of come up with kind of prototypes basically of how that would function, and how the users of the centre would be able to kind of easily use that. I think that would have been one element that might have been problematic for maybe other fabricators and maybe more traditional contractors to sort of take on board, whereas that's something that we prototyped in our workshop and kind of worked quite kind of closely on.
Yeah, great. I'll maybe go back a couple of images just to give you a little bit more context. So there was, and the engineers will come on to talk about this, but there was a huge amount of steel integration, and you know, we were making high-end bits of furniture in this staircase, and everything's working within a tolerance of a mil or 2 mil. So it was really interesting going on site, and yeah, the steelwork wasn't didn't have the same. The timber didn't have the same relationship with the steelwork, so we actually had to not retrofit, but we had to do a lot of work to the steelwork, unbolting and shimming things out to make that actually work as well. So it was a challenge, and you know, we're not a main contractor as well, so we had a good relationship with the main contractor, but it's complicated and a tense environment in places. But it worked out really, really well in the end. So we've just got I think we've got 5 images here of the finished job. We just made the staircase and the balustrade, so there was quite a key into communication with the main contractor who did the new flooring throughout on all levels as well. So it was really important to make sure we got that spot on. It's just some more nice photographs here, and again the maple and the birch ply, as Kieran will touch on, is continued along each floor. Really nice, yeah, really nice detail. We incorporated this was the edge, the external edge that Scott was talking about, that was lined in maple. The wraparound handrail as well is also made in solid maple. There's no skirting or anything. Instead of that, we went for a nice healthy shadow gap as well, which has worked really well. The stairs offer the opportunity to sit on the steps and also to walk down. And just some more pictures. This will yeah, this is a little animation, but I'm not sure it's wanting to behave. But so this is a screen here on your left-hand side, which a bifold screen which opens up and intersects the staircase here, and shuts the space off, so the space can be closed for events on either floor, which was a big part of the project. All the ironmongery, again, this was really bespoke, so there isn't an off-the-shelf system, so we had to adapt certain things from Haefele and other high-end ironmongery suppliers to make that work. So last image, we'll just quickly finish up. I think it's always really important to reflect on these projects, and I guess it'd be interesting if we were to start this project tomorrow again. If we, I mean, the maple and walnut and birch plywood were all FSC and certified, and from responsible suppliers. But I wonder if there'd be more onus on sustainability. You know, we could have swapped out the maple, for instance, with ash, and maybe used an elm or a wych elm instead of walnut, and using more native hardwoods. So that's, yeah, something to maybe something we can talk about at the end. Okay, we'll just stop sharing our screen now. Thanks.
So I think that's back to me. I'll share my screen and continue. I was going to, sorry, 1 second. I was going to, yeah, sorry, it goes back to the start. Sorry about that. So if we go back to, this was the downstairs space. I thought I'd just, while Neville and Scott were talking, I thought I'd just show this picture. This is it closed. So it was, we wanted to be able to have people have an event, an evening upstairs, but not be able to come downstairs into, you know, basically a shared workspace. So this is the screen in a closed position. And as Neville says, they had done something, we'd seen something they'd done with bifolding shutters in a house in London. And so we knew they could do this. We gave them this brief. And but it's one of the things that's interesting, I think, is that at the end, you know, people don't spot this at all. It's just over in the corner, and it makes this impact. So I've got some pictures of the same pictures of the project, but this picture was quite important to us, this one and these pictures. So this is, I'll continue to just talk about the lowering down of the entrance space. So we're now a metre lower, and then that connects. So we're on the picture on the right, we're standing in the office building looking back towards the church. This is the front door here, and this is Neville and Scott's stair that goes down into the basement. So doing all this work sort of connected these two buildings together. But yes, and so I just mentioned in passing that this was timber that was recycled from the church. It was old pews that they reused in the workshop space and made this reception desk. They being the Charteris Centre themselves, who had a workshop. Okay, so just to talk about the outside for a little bit. So we dropped the floor down. The current floor level, the previous floor level was kind of this height. So you can see here where the windows are, there are stone infill pieces. So the windows drop down, and the entrance is level access entrance. And then we have this, what we call the link building between two. This was the subject of quite a lot of work, quite a lot of problems and structural things, which Andy and Mike will talk about, but this was it previously. The entrance, as you can see, these were the 5-6 steps up to the front door. It was a funny little single-story link building. This is the 1860s office building, 1912 for the church. And there were, and this is the sketcher model. That space, this entrance had a lot of work to do. So this is our 3.5 meters wide, 11 meter high infill building. Into that we had to have the lift, because this was the only place that connected with both buildings. And here is a buttress to the church that holds up the nave window from. So actually we had 1.1 meters of actual space to get in the building, and you come into the foyer. So here's Scott and Neville's stair. By the way, the reason so I wanted to also add that we wanted to, if we go back a couple of pictures, the language of the material choice led to the language of the interior of the building. You know, so it continues everywhere. You know, the birch face ply, the maple. We did you know, even though Neville and Scott didn't do this flooring, it looks like they did. It's the same kind of language, same kind of detailing. So the main contractor was then given that thing to follow. But this was the outside work. As we move on, so the building on the right, this is the office building. It was it only had a ground floor, didn't have a basement, so we had to underpin underneath that building because we were building the lift shaft down into the basement. So there was quite a lot of, and Mike and Andy, and I mean Mike was involved in this. This was around the middle of COVID, so this started I think March 2020. Which actually helped us in some ways, because we were able to close the street, for example, and no one complained about that. And, I mean, we closed the site for 6 weeks, but so we came back in May 2020. This is the existing. I thought this was quite interesting. This is rock, actual rock that the building's built off, the neighbouring building. So they didn't hardly had any foundations below this level. And but when they built the church, they dug down into that rock and made the basement. So So this is it from the street, and this is our retaining walls, basically retaining to the street and retaining to the existing office building. So quite a lot of big structural issues. I'll let Andy and Mike talk about these. So the reason that Neville and Scott were given this slightly wonky structural steel is because of fire regulations. So they are that you, in event of a fire, a timber stair shouldn't burn down to the ground. You should be able to, firemen should be able to enter a fire. I don't know what the non-gendered fireman is, but they should be coming to the building safely and be able to enter. And so we had this is this structure, the steel coming across. This is our outside of the building. And this is it from below, and then the steel structure going in with the handrails. So this was the steel that was then handed over to Old School Fabrications. There's quite a lot of things that we could talk about this building, and I just thought we should touch on the material representation of the outside. So we've used Akoya timber fins, and they're onto sorry, I've written it down, so I always forget the name of it. Terrazzo, a kind of concrete with stone chippings mix, which was made by Cambridge Architectural Precast. We had to find a way to articulate this elevation, both as an entrance, so people know where the entrance is, but also as a way of dealing with. There's a whole lot of lines that between these two buildings that didn't quite line up, and so this is a street in Edinburgh, and it's a classical kind of city. It has this rusticated stone base and then fair-faced, ashlar stone above. But in the basement of these buildings, they have this very rusticated base. So we're quite interested in tying into that language. This is a Doric column, which I really like the fluting in Doric columns, and we'd always been thinking about how could we use that language on a flat surface. So we collaborated with another practice. So a lot of our work is collaboration, working with good people and finding ways to do things together. This is an artist called Chalk Plaster here. This is a modern version of a ceiling rose in a modern building, and they're interested in this kind of faceting. So between them and us, we came up with this. This is a maquette, a 1, 2, 4 of this rustication at the base of our building. So this was done in plaster. We ended up doing the main thing in terrazzo. So this is about 2 meters tall. And basically what it does is it provides a signifier that this is the front door, and it also limits the desire to spray paint it, because it's basically whitish stone, which would be susceptible to attack. So people just don't mess with stuff like this, I think, because it gets in the way of your spray can. And that pattern became a pattern for the centre. So we used that in the manifestation on the windows. This is Old School stair looking into the main hall. And then this is the view from the street. So it's quite clear where the entrance is, I think. So then the next thing to talk about is tone, because this is the building we inherited. It's dark ceilinged roof. I don't know why people paint wood brown. It's this kind of what children color wood as, is this kind of brown color. But it was quite, it wasn't horrible, but it was quite dark and quite imposing, and we wanted to lighten it up and make it welcoming and open to people. So this is a sort of, we sandblasted. We used that soda material and soda blasted the brown off. We got to this effect after a few passes, and you can see around the knots that you get some staining. So we tried a whitewash. We'd originally thought of a lime wash, and then we ended up with a kind of a watered down version of paint, basically. But as soon as we put it on, we thought it was too strong. So then we took it back off again. And then between the process of taking it off and what it was like before, it watered down the knots. The knots became less kind of dominant, and we had this tone, which, as you can see, matches quite well with the maple. Sorry, this is the existing floor, which is pine, but you see the birch face plywood, the maple doors, and then we had some fins, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'm conscious of time, so I need to keep going. I've got Andy and Mike next. So in the main space, this is the only window which wasn't changed. We double glazed all the windows. This was the only one that didn't change, and it was for cost reasons, although I think it's part of the phase 2 work now is to change this glass. But we made a storage space, and we used these maple fins as our language. And we also, whenever we could, so this centre is about people communicating with each other and making connections and doing things together. A lot of it is kind of co-working. And so any chance we got, we put in a bench. So benches under windows, benches in nooks. And we used this kind of language which continued elsewhere wherever we could. And another space I haven't talked about yet is this. They called it a sanctuary, a sort of sacred space, which is the main hall is in the background, and the outside is behind us. We're standing right up hard against the wall, and the idea was to make a separation between this space. This is a quiet space for all religions and none, a space for contemplation, also give you a space for yoga or some, discussions or counselling. So we had acoustic glass between the two spaces. You can see the acoustic glass lines and fins that we inserted, and then we used this kind of fin language on the glass on the outside to stop there being a strong visual connection, so they could have privacy. But again, we had a bench, and we took the opportunity to do this kind of scallop detail, just to push people on the bench away from the door, so you were not sitting right next to the door as it came in. And again, using Scott and Neville's language of birch-faced plywood and maple. The language of fins, which we used on the outside elevation, was also continued inside. That this is over the windows, so we continue the same fins. So there's an akoya on the outside and maple on the inside. And this is my last image. And it's one of my favourite images of the centre of this triple height space as you come in, 11.5 metres tall, very narrow, and with what we call bridges in between. So a lot of this was about matching the grain. So the grain runs in this direction and then up vertically and then back down and loops over. And it was quite interesting having Old School on site because they were kind of furniture grade shop joiners, and we were kind of pushing the main contractor to get it as good as that type thing. And so there was times on site we had to say, well, actually, look, that's how you should do it, because Old School had done these birch ply fins on the ground and basement floors. Okay, so I've touched briefly on engineering. I'd like to hand over to Forshaw Gauld now, so I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. I'll just share mine. About that. Okay, good. So while I gave a little bit of an introduction, I thought we could bask in the loveliness of the contrast between these before and after shots, because it really is quite striking what Kieran was talking about, the lack of light in the original building compared to how it was translated and transferred into this modern church. It's lovely. So I'm Andy Forshaw, director with Forshaw Gauld Engineers, with my colleague Mike, who will talk in a second. And we were the structural engineers for this project and the approved certifiers of design, which is a Scottish Building Regs role for those not local. It's a complicated refurbishment and retrofit projects for us, and a lot's been talked about some of the heavy structure. Kieran showed some of the foundations. There's a lot of concrete in there. There's a lot of underpinning. Most of the heavy lifting of the structure is done by steelwork or concrete. There's some masonry in there as well. But because we're on a timber presentation, I thought I'd just put in a little slide here just to highlight that in amongst all of that, there is a lot of what would be referred to as secondary structure. And these are our main structural layouts, and I've simply highlighted where we've referred to timber. So it's not for reading, obviously, it's far too small for that, but it just gives a flavour that in amongst all the heavy steelwork and the slappings and the concrete underpinning, there's still a significant amount of references to timber, and these related to the partitions or strengthening of the existing floor, because it's a traditional building. New floor joists, obviously the carcassing and frame that goes under the steep feature stair, drop ceilings that are in there as well. And a lot of the finishes, or the support to the finishes that Kieran's just showed. There was a short section of external wall on the back of the lobby, and the inner leaf of that, the structural inner leaf of that was timber as well. And throughout the project, one of the points of mentioning all this is throughout the project, we specified C16 grade timber, and there is a bit of a drive at the minute to promote the use of C16. It's something that we've done for many years, and we find that a project isn't, it's not detrimental in any way to a project, and only in certain cases you would need to increase the grade to a C24. So we find that certainly for this type of structure, and even if it's for more load bearing, then C16 is certainly good enough. And the main benefit of that is that it's UK sourced. So whilst Old School referenced but potentially the thought process going behind the selection of wood, if you go for C16, then chances are it's UK timber. So already that it's starting its life much closer to the project than it possibly could do if it was C24. C24, by contrast, is almost exclusively imported timber. So that's a little slide on timber, and I'll let Mike talk about one or two of the structural elements.
Hi there, I'm Mike Gauld from Forshaw Gauld Engineers. I was involved in the bulk of the structural design to the structural alterations at Greyfriars. We actually designed this back in 2018, so when it was on site during COVID, it was still designed about 5 years ago. So it's had to look back and jog the memory. I think when I look back at this project, I can break it down into two bits. And when you look at the front elevation, you have on the left-hand side this tall square structure, and that's the bell tower, which houses a staircase, steel staircase, which is overclad in timber, and that accesses the ground floor lobby and first floor sacred space, which are behind the arched windows you can see in the front elevation. Just to the right of that, you've got what we refer to as the link building, which is set over 4 stories with a lift which accesses all the stories. And whilst this presentation is primarily about timber, this project really had a bit of everything for us. There was a lot of steelwork in the lobby and link building and bell tower from ground floor up. You had some reinforced concrete in the link building and the below ground works. You had precast cladding to the front elevation, and you had a further screen and a Koya timber in front of that. So if we move on to the next slide, it was difficult in a project this size to pick out some bits to chat about, but I thought there was a good chance that the stairs might crop up. So on the right hand side, you can see a picture which shows the main lobby looking out to the street. You see the arched windows. On the left hand side, there's an excerpt of our ground floor drawing. And we've shown the steel beams in a dark, thick, continuous line there, and it kind of gives you an idea of how much steel was going in and the level of disruption. And on just off that shot on the left-hand side is the bell tower. So you walk through the opening here into the lobby. You can go up or down the stairs into the main church hall or lower ground floor space, or you can continue into the link building. So you can see on our drawing hatched is masonry. We've got some really thick stone walls between the bell tower and the lobby and the link space. And one of the challenges here, I guess, was supporting the wall, which was about 1 meter thick. If you put in obvious kind of simple beam and pad stone arrangement, you end up overstressing structure elsewhere quite quickly. So we ended up with some steel spreader frames, which you can see in the middle picture. So that basically involves a beam at high level, and they support the structure above. You've got posts at each end, which connect the upper beam to beams in the floor, which do the same span. And the beams at the lower level distribute the loads from above back into the wall below without you overloading any of the remaining structure elsewhere. You've probably also heard of the kind of the other ones are, when you hear about frames, you would have heard, I guess, stability frames. That's the main one you might have heard about from engineers, and this is slightly different because instead of worrying about lateral loads, we're more concerned about the vertical loads here. If you jog back to the left-hand side drawing, you'll see a couple of the beams are noted as cranked, either side of the feature staircase, and that takes us on to the next slide. So the photo, both on the left, taken during construction, on the right is obviously the finished article. So it's taken in the lower ground floor, and you can see the carcassing to the feature stairs, and you can see the beam which was noted as cranked, spanning from what's a steel post. You can kind of just make out on the left-hand side towards the front of the church. The carcassing below the stairs is pretty simple structure. Again, you know, you've got joists spanning the width of the stairs, supported on timber walls each side, with further timber walls intermediately to break up the span. So there's nothing too kind of complicated going on. And you can also make out in this picture, there's two different types of balustrades. So the lower floor has got a structural handrail, where you've got a handrail which resists people pushing on it, and that spans between two posts. Whereas on the cranked beam at the top, you've got a cantilevered balustrade, which basically all the spindles, which are 100 mil apart, they all contribute to the stability of the balustrade. And then when someone pushes at the top of that balustrade, all the moment goes into that the spindles, and then you take that out of the connection at low level to the beam. So the main driving force as to why we decided against handrails or cantilevered spindles, it was basically to do with the final thickness of that clad stair. The feature staircase has about 100 mil, and I think as you go from the lobby up into the main church hall, I think it was about half of that. It was 50 with the cladding, so we couldn't really get anything in timber to work. And then if you go into the next photo, you'll see again that view from a slightly different perspective, again with the cranked steel, with the balustrades. The last slide I was going to show was the front elevation of the building. Again, we've got an excerpt of our drawing on the left-hand side, and the final images on the right. And this is just really to show how much is going on. So on the left-hand side of our drawing, we've got an elevation showing the Akoya timber fins, which are supported on the stone walls of the church and stone walls of the administration block each side, as well as some bracketry which protrudes from a beam at high level ground floor, so above the main entrance. And on the right hand side, we've got the precast cladding setting out. For any kind of sharp-eyed people out there, you'll see some dashed lines horizontally, which indicate the center line of beams behind, which restrain that cladding. And if there wasn't enough in that elevation going on, we've also got a cantilevered canopy just above the ground floor entrance. You can see a detail at the bottom of our drawing. It's supported on a block wall inset from the cladding at the ground to the right hand side, and at the left hand side it just overhangs simply. So just conscious of time, I'll maybe just hand you back to Kieran now.
Maybe Tabitha?
Oh, Tabitha, sorry.
Thank you, that has been absolutely fantastic. So anybody in your audience, we have one question, so if you would like to post any more in there, please do. I mean, you've just seen a fantastic presentation of what you do to knit two buildings together. When you see it from the inside, all the finished photographs, you have no idea, and seeing that whole skeleton, and the challenges you have to overcome. Absolutely amazing. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. I'll ask the question, and then that may lead on to others, that's posted by one of our anonymous attendees. What's concerns about the wood getting dirty and worn over time? Now, you talked about a lacquer, but I'm sure there's several coatings that you put across different staircases or handrails, or maybe use the same thing everywhere. Kieran, I think you want to answer that.
I was going to answer that, but I think we should hand over to Scott and Neville. But I just want to show this is their sample data which they gave us. We also have their stair tread, and on the back of this is the answer. And I thought maybe Scott, do you remember what all the materials were? No. So there was lots of different. We tried lots of different varnishes. We were trying to get a varnish that was not too glossy, not too yellowy. You know, there was quite a lot of testing done. I mean, in my personal opinion, some staining is to be expected on light coloured materials, and I don't think it's a problem. There's a great building by Chipperfield in Berlin, I don't know if it's the Neues or the Altes Museum, where you can see where people have been sitting because they rest their head against the material, and you get these two kind of long stains, the children level and the adult level, and it's really nice. It's the patina of life that I really like. But anyway, I think so far so good. The building's 2 years, been open since January 2022, so that's a year and a bit open, and it's sort of surviving quite well. It's, you know, well maintained, but that isn't proving to be a huge problem.
No, and there's there's so many different things that we could comment on, and yeah, just how it all knits together. So we've got a question here from James. How do you replace the window glazing if needed? Do the Accoya fins detach to allow maintenance? But the building looks incredible. It is things. So yeah, it's maintenance and cleaning, obviously, as you go, as you go along.
The fins do get in the way, but the fins do detach. There are brackets at the top and bottom, and you can take them out. I don't know when you would replace that. I mean, it's toughened, double glazed. I wouldn't expect to replace it. The cleaning's an issue, and so they need to get up on a cherry picker for the top floor glass. But yeah, some of the other glass, the huge bits of glass, I'd be very worried if we ever had to replace them, because that would be kind of deconstructing parts of it. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
But they're internal, are they, than the other main bits of glass? So.
Yes, the main in that sacred space, they were pushed in from the inside. And
yeah, so you'd expect a greater, longer performance without the driving rain, and wind and Scottish weather heading against it. Just one final question there. Like fire performance, not necessarily the lacquer, but did you have to add sort of spread of flame treatment to anything, or was that? It'll be on the back of the. I love this. Maybe it's one we come back to. You've muted yourself, Kieran.
Sorry. In the church hall, because it was an existing building, we didn't have to do the surface spread of flame treatment. We have done that elsewhere with a clear varnish, and those varnishes do exist. But yeah, no, there weren't any surface spread of flame issues.
As a final question coming about cost, but obviously you had a budget to work to. And you seem to have some very happy clients, so I'm not sure things cost what they cost, don't they? And
the construction budget was £1.5 million. It ended up costing more. There was a few things added in, blinds to the windows and things. So I think the final construction budget's about 1.7 million. But we did a lot of things. We did, it wasn't just the things we've talked about, the more aesthetic things. We put in bathrooms, a whole new heating system. Dug out the basement slab and insulated the loft, and there's solar panels going in. So, but it was a big financial commitment from the client, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's changed the building absolutely completely. No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's the first webinar we've done on, almost like a retrofit, and that whole interior fit out, and as everybody's saying, it looks absolutely beautiful, and I'm sure you have some very happy clients and happy clients. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to Kieran, Andrew and Mike, and Neville and Scott. Fingers crossed I don't get some problems with my IT now. And this is the 4th in our series. You can see all these and catch up with them on our YouTube channel. And we'd like to ask you to join us again on Wednesday, the 7th of June, to hear about the UK hardwoods storage building, which I know you've all said about using some homegrown timber. I think they used all homegrown timber with a bit of sheep's wool thrown in for good measure. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much all for your time, and we'll end the webinar here.